Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some breaking news out of Lincoln, Nebraska, as Myles Farmer has officially entered the transfer portal. Now, if you've been keeping up with fall practice notes, with Matt Rhule's press conferences, you would have heard Myles Farmer has been suspended from the Nebraska program. And I believe Matt Rhule used the term, the ball's in his court on if he wants to be with this program or not. And we find out a couple days later, Myles Farmer hitting the transfer portal. Now, I want to have the conversation. We've talked a lot about Nebraska football, but a lot of that emphasis has been on the personnel, the new faces in this program, how we think this Nebraska program is going to come together in 2023. And we haven't had as much of a discussion about the culture change that Matt Rhule is going to try to have take place with this Nebraska program. And that is kind of the biggest storyline for Nebraska heading into 2023. A lot of the national media and college football pundits like to say that Nebraska and Matt Rhule is taking over kind of a rebuild situation. Now, that's in my lens through it, that's not true, right? I think Matt Rhule is taking over a program that has the talent in place. This is not a roster rebuild. This is more of you're hiring a guy in Matt Rhule who's a proven winner, who's proven himself as having that ability to establish a winning culture. He did it at Temple, he did it at Baylor, and now he's going to try to do that at Nebraska. And sometimes when that happens, guys who were committed to Scott Frost, were used to doing stuff a certain way, and now it's looking drastically different, are going to fall off the wagon, and that sometimes happens. Now, before we get into what's changing and kind of my takes on the situation, just want to say thank you to you guys. Whenever I get a chance to talk some Nebraska football, I'm always going to take up on it. You guys have been so supportive. This has been one of the programs that I've enjoyed the most talking about. The support from you guys does mean a lot. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, I'd love to hear your guys' take on the Myles Farmer situation. And more importantly, the culture shift that is happening in Lincoln, Nebraska. Because when you listen, I think I've said this before, I love listening to Matt Rhule. I think he's one of the more well thought out and transparent coaches with the media. And you get a really good sense of what the changes are within this Nebraska program. And you're seeing that right at the start of fall camp, right? The guys are living in dorms. They're not really allowed to leave campus. They're living with roommates, right? And you have the big offensive lineman with I believe Turner Cochran was saying his feet are hanging off the bed. It's hard for him to sleep. You're seeing drastic changes within this Nebraska program and how things are running, right? Matt Rhule talking about, I want guys to be a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable. I want them to kind of grow and bond a little bit more together. Things are looking different. You even go back to spring practice. They were tackling quarterbacks during the spring game. That is drastically different. You look back at what Scott Frost was doing there in the spring game. I believe his last spring game in Lincoln, they were doing thud. They weren't even tackling. And what you saw was, as a result, as you go to Ireland and play a Northwestern team where you're significantly more talented in, and you come out flat, you look like you can't play physical football, and maybe that's a result of just not playing physical during spring and fall camp. And so Matt Rhule completely going with the 180 and changing how they do a lot of things in Lincoln, Nebraska. And you've seen this before, right? Anthony Grant, I believe in spring practice, was not with the program for a couple practices because he had some stuff to figure out. I believe Matt Rhule used the language. He wasn't living up to the Nebraska standard of what they expect. Now, Anthony Grant stays with the program, comes back, and you can kind of say he's bought in. And that's probably the most important thing you're taking away. And I don't mean to undervalue and talk about Myles Farmer not being a quality football player for Nebraska, but for this culture change to happen, for this winning culture to get established, you need every person in that locker room to get bought in. I think you're seeing a lot of similarities with what Shane Beamer's doing at South Carolina, right? The last couple of years, they've had some big names enter the transfer portal, guys who were going to start, guys who were going to be contributors. They weren't leaving because they couldn't find reps. They were leaving because, hey, this is not what I'm used to. This is not what I committed to, and I want to change. Now, Shane Beamer's having a lot of success changing that culture. I think a lot of it has to do with having those guys in the locker room who are still riding. They need to be bought into what you're trying to do. And I think this is kind of an example of Myles Farmer maybe not buying in to what Nebraska is trying to do in terms of the culture. And then there's another element of it. I don't want to ignore. We'll take a look at the depth chart and talk about what this depth chart looks like. And there was, I mean, some buzz, I guess you'd say, that Myles Farmer wasn't necessarily going to be a starter for Nebraska in 2023. And he played significant snaps for Nebraska in 2022. And what you have is dramatic change in terms of the defensive schematics, right? You have Tony White coming in, running the 3-3-5. I think you can read into it a couple ways. One, I think the most likely, and again, I'm not trying to read into it. I don't have any insider information on what the problem was with Myles Farmer, but I think the bones of it probably was that he just wasn't, that he didn't really buy into what Matt Rhule was trying to do. And then there's another element where, hey, maybe he did not fit the 3-3-5 schematics of that defense as well as some other players. And if you're kind of taking it through a personnel lens, I think that tells you a lot about what a guy like Corey Collier might be looking like during spring practice, during summer workouts, and as they started fall camp, in terms of, hey, you might not be starting, not being playing as much snaps because you're not as good at fitting into that 3-3-5. And so for Nebraska, I guess circling back, this secondary is the unit that I've been most high on for Nebraska heading into 2023. We've gone in depth on this program, kind of talking about the personnel. And that was when we did our deep dive. That was the unit that we're most excited about. Really, really good cornerbacks, a deep safety room. So for Nebraska, from a personnel standpoint, you're certainly not panicking, right? I mean, Marcus Buford Jr., hopefully he's back healthy by the end of fall camp. I know he's not practicing right now, but if you're a Nebraska fan, I think the panic level is not high. I think this is kind of a result of, hey, we're trying to change what we're doing, how this program is running from a culture standpoint. And sometimes when you do that and you have a massive culture shift, guys are going to fall off the wagon. This is still a team that I'm extremely excited about from a standpoint of this. This is they have the most talented. They have the talent to win a Big Ten West title this year. And we've been kind of on record. So a team I'm very excited about. I don't think you're necessarily panicking about the Myles Farmer leaving the program. Still a program that we're going to be keeping a close eye on. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys, checking it out. Kind of my takes on the situation. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate y'all. We'll talk to y'all later.